Hello friends, it's me, and today let's watch Food Theory, why you may never eat Kraft mac and cheese ever again from the food theorists. Together, let's go. Let's start. Thank you.
Your favorite snacks may be going bye-bye. Right now, underneath grocery store shelves the world over, big wigs in smoke-filled rooms, probably, are divvying up aisles of tasty treats like they're lines on a map. And as a result of this wheeling and dealing, some of your go-to food brands might be cut out of the picture. And the trigger for this monumental shift in the world of food? A breakup? Hello, Internet! Welcome to Food Theory, the show that would never break up with you. Mwah! But not every.
Hello Internet, welcome to Food Theory. Hello, welcome.
Thing in the world of food can be sunshine and rainbows, because for the biggest food brands in the world, there's been a lot of drama. At some point in your life, you've probably seen some variation of this graph, showing how basically every food and drink you can possibly think of is owned by one of just a handful of companies. And it's true. Over the past few decades, we've watched as all of our favorite brands have been gobbled up and funneled into these massive multinational food corporations. As time has gone on, these companies have only gotten larger and larger as mergers and acquisitions have transformed these businesses into these hulking, amorphous blobs that dominate the grocery aisle. But as of
And the unfortunate thing is the people in charge of it, the top of the pyramid, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. That's quite unfortunate.
late, something has started to shift. Instead of continuing the trend of always bigger, never stop, we're starting to see these mega corporations start to break apart. A few years ago, cereal giant Kellogg's split its cereal and snacking businesses into two separate companies. Keurig Dr. Pepper also announced recently that it was planning on splitting its coffee and soda business in two, despite the fact the companies had only merged together a few years ago. But the big breakup news that really caught my attention is the most recent one, Kraft Heinz. Kraft Heinz, makers of so many of the staple food brands, would also be going their separate ways, leading to some of your favorite snacks being torn apart. Oscar Mayer hot dogs will no longer be under the same bun as Heinz ketchup. And even Kraft Singles and Kraft mac and cheese, both Kraft brands, will no longer be part of the same company moving forward. And the breakups don't stop there. There have even been calls from Pepsi's own investors to do the same. So all of this has me wondering why? Why are all of these companies who have spent the better part of the last century fusing into these enormous blobs suddenly finding the need to recouple more than the cast of Love Island? And what does this mean for you and me? How will these seismic shifts in the movers and salt shakers of the food industry affect what we can buy when we walk into a Walmart? That's what I want to uncover today. So pile into my cart, loyal theorists, as we browse the aisles of knowledge to find out why is big food breaking up. But
Let's begin. Let's start. Thank you for the food tourists. To the food tourists.
speaking of what I have in my cart, let me see here. Hello, loyal theorists. We have been working on something special for you. We saw your comments and heard your feedback, so we put our heads together and had a lot of, extremely serious conversations. And we are finally ready to let you in on our big secret. That's right, we are so back! Theoryware has returned, and this time the gang's all here. Get ready for new shirts, new hoodies, and new accessories featuring all 5 channels in the Theoryverse you know and love. No matter which channel's your favorite, GT Live, Style, Game, Food, Film, Food, you're represented here. And who knows, I've heard Theoryware can be a great
Yeah, food. Definitely food.
conversation starter.
Sup.
I stabbed a man in Reno.
Maybe you'll make new friends with a fellow theorist next time you're out and about. Or maybe wrap yourself in a super soft theorist hoodie paired with some cozy socks while watching new episodes in the comfort of your home. We hope you'll have as much fun with the new and improved Theoryware as we did. Jump into the comments to let us know which item is your favorite and help us celebrate what makes the theorist community so special. You. What are you waiting for? Shop the drop by scanning the QR code on screen or clicking the link in the description. So before we can fully understand why all of these mega food corporations are breaking up, we should probably start by figuring out what it means for a company to break up. Was there some sort of infidelity? A big fight? Did Jeremiah really love Bomb Huda? To answer those in order, no, and definitely not touching that one. That's not to say that some of these breakups don't lead to hurt feelings, but we'll get to that. So in order to understand what actually happens when a mega company breaks up, let's look at the example of Kraft Heinz, since they're the latest food giant to announce a split. Kraft Heinz's plan plan is to create two brand new corporate entities. From there, they'll take all of the brands in their massive portfolio and funnel them into one of these two new companies. Now, you might be thinking that means Kraft will be Kraft and Heinz will be Heinz and never the twain shall meet. But no, they're not splitting up by brand. They're splitting up based on growth. One of these companies, temporarily called Global Taste Elevation Co. Doesn't that make the old stomach rumble? Will take all of the lucrative sauces, spreads, and seasonings, as well as shelf-stable meals. These are things like Heinz ketchup and Philadelphia cream cheese, as well as Kraft mac and cheese. Meanwhile, the other company, with the equally lame and temporary name, North American Grocery Co., will take on Kraft Heinz's more legacy brands like Oscar Mayer and Lunchables, as well as Capri Sun and Maxwell House. And yes, as I mentioned earlier, Kraft Singles will now be separated from its brother in cheese thanks to this divorce. But why divvy up the company like this? It makes sense when you take into account that these companies will not just have different brands, but totally different business models. The sauces and spreads company will have a global focus, attempting to grow and spread into as many markets as possible as quickly as possible. Like the Joker said, rip my boy Heath,
aggressive expansion.
Meanwhile, the grocery company will focus solely on the North American market, where they already have a dominant footprint, and will instead emphasize becoming more efficient and making slow but steady growth. And while all of that seems convoluted, because it is, it's not the first time a company has chosen to split up like this. Back in 2023, when Kellogg's bifurcated into two companies, one of the new companies, WK Kellogg, took control of the legacy North American cereal brands, like Corn Flakes and Fruit Loops. Meanwhile, the other company, Kellanova, took ownership over the lucrative, global-focused snack brands, like Pringles and Pop-Tarts. But what made the Kraft-Heinz breakup so unique is just how spectacularly awful the marriage had been in the first place. You see, Kraft and Heinz had only recently come together, around 2015, and when the two companies fused, all signs pointed to this being Gogeta levels of awesome. The merger of the two food giants was mostly spearheaded by one man, the Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett. And if you don't know who Warren Buffett is, he's basically the single most prolific and successful investor of all time, currently sitting as the 10th richest person in the world with a net worth of nearly $150 billion. And in the process, he developed his stellar reputation of always betting on safe, reliable investments. And so, when Warren Buffett is the one heading up the merger of two of the biggest food companies in the world, with decades of brand loyalty, allowing both companies to become more efficient and have a bigger market share, people thought, what could possibly go wrong? And
Don't say that. That is famous last words. But having said that, he is known to only invest on safe and reliable. So if he is investing on it, people is like, he is investing on them. He is famous for only investing on safe and reliable. Then they are safe and reliable. That's right.
it turns out, everything! Despite seeing an initial surge post-merger, ever since 2017, Kraft Heinz's stock price has fallen off a cliff, losing over 70% of its value since its high. And the situation had only become more dire recently, as they reported that their total revenue had declined for 6 straight quarters. In business speak, that's no bueno. But how could this have happened? How could bringing together two of the most iconic and largest companies in the world into one super entity turn so south so fast? Well, in an ironic twist of fate, the main problem that Kraft Heinz ran into was the fact that it became too big. You see, when a company gets to the size and scale of something like Kraft Heinz, instead of being this towering titan, it ends up becoming this lumbering blob that becomes too slow to make quick or big decisions. You'll be
Shingeki no Kyojin and Pokemon references.
familiar with this if you've ever tried to organize hanging out with your friends. Two people can plan a multi-week long vacation with ease. But have you ever tried getting 7 people to just agree on where to go to dinner? It's a nightmare.
Oh, it's quite easy if they are kids or if they are like school childrens, you know. It's kind of difficult if you are all adults and you have all adult lives.
Bigger does not always mean easier. Now, imagine being a company with over 200 brands across 55 different categories, spread over 150 countries. Yeah, it's gonna be hard to make any meaningful changes. There's only so much time and resources available. And so, when a company gets as large as Kraft Heinz, they're forced to focus their efforts on brands and products that will generate them the most profit quickly. I mean, someone has to look out for the poor, helpless shareholders. And
who are millions of dollars rich, multi-millions of dollars rich, billions of dollars rich, multi-billions of dollars rich. The top 0.01% of individuals. Gosh.
So, by Kraft Heinz's logic, by splitting the company in two, each individual company can focus their attention and resources on a smaller pool of brands and be better able to adapt to the differing challenges that each one faces. For example, while the sauces and spreads business might need to focus on getting Heinz ketchup on shelves in more and more countries, the grocery business can instead focus domestically. Since Oscar Mayer already has full market saturation in the US and Canada, they can aim to cut costs and try to compete in the hyper-competitive North American market. But of course, I've been around the block a few times. I've seen companies make these sorts of moves promising to increase profits and innovation, so I gotta ask, who really benefits from this sort of corporate unmerger? I mean, at this point,
So case in point, a lot of times, sadly speaking, humans tend to have the tendency to overpromise and underdeliver. As for Mr. Beast, is more towards, he mentioned this, underpromise, overdeliver. So yeah, hopefully I can become like that as well. Hopefully.
isn't it obvious? It's the shareholders. Will no one think of the shareholders? With Kraft Heinz stock in the toilet, something has to be done to turn things around, or some investment banker might be forced to sell their second yacht, and nobody wants that. All kidding aside, it's not like Kraft Heinz is keeping this a secret. In their press release announcing the breakup, they said that one of the big rationales behind the split was to increase shareholder value. It also makes the idea of investing in these companies much simpler for shareholders, because life is just so hard and complicated for them as it is. But in the case of Kraft Heinz, if you're interested in a company with high growth potential, a real high risk, high reward, the sauces and spreads company is the clear option. But if you're interested in a company whose business is focused more on slow but reliable growth, then the grocery company would be a very Buffettian investment. And yes, I did just coin and trademark that. And speaking of Buffett, as the architect of the Kraft Heinz merger, you shouldn't be too shocked to hear that he's not the biggest fan of the inevitable breakup. Although he does agree that in hindsight, the merger was probably a mistake. He also doesn't believe that breaking up will solve any of Kraft Heinz's problems and could open them up to even more risk. But despite his reservations and despite owning over a quarter of the entire business, the breakup of Kraft Heinz is moving forward. So it is happening, folks. And unsurprisingly, splitting up the assets of a multinational food conglomerate is gonna have some effects on, the food. So the real question is, how will this breakup affect us, everyday consumers? While I do like corporate restructuring and stock price fluctuation as much as the next guy, no, seriously, I actually find this stuff super fascinating. But let's be
Really?
real. At my core, I'm a food guy. And so what I really want to know is how
I mean, to be fair, you are the food tourist. Bon appetit.
all of these corporate breakups and shakeups are actually going to affect my favorite treats. Will some of my go-to snacks end up disappearing from grocery store shelves? Or will everything remain the same and this will all have amounted to nothing more than a corporate shell game? Well, that depends on how the new companies spun off from these breakups react to the real cause of their stunted growth, the consumers. That's right, the thing that these amorphous corporate blobs got too big to effectively adapt to is the ever-changing consumer. As one example, take the near infinite amount of variety of products we see nowadays. I mean, who exactly is asking for Selena Gomez flavored Oreos? I know I'm not. Hot take, the only flavors of Oreos we actually need are double stuff. No, that's it. And it seems the bigger the corporation gets, the more they think that consumers want a never-ending well of variety that, I'll reiterate, no one asked for. One more time for the people in the back. No one asked for! I mean, sure, the occasional limited-time Coke flavor is fun. Bring back Oreo Coke, you cowards. But do consumers actually want original Heinz ketchup? Heinz with no artificial sweeteners? Heinz with no salt added? Heinz with a blend of veggies? And Heinz organic certified? And each new product or SKU, as the biz kids call it, that you bring to market requires more marketing, more factory time, more complex supply chains. All that serves to do is to drive up the cost for products that may or may not be what consumers are actually clamoring for. And sure, corporate blobs are the only companies large enough to even attempt putting out this many varieties. But just because they can doesn't mean they should. That's why one of the big things that consumers may be able to look forward to when it comes to these corporate breakups is the decrease in the sheer number of products being sold, opening up shelf space for new, innovative products to fill those gaps. Another thing that consumers may be able to rejoice in with these newer, smaller companies is the fact that these companies may now be able to listen and adapt to not only what sorts of products they make, but
Bear Grylls reference. Bear Grylls.
what those products contain. It's no secret that we as a society over the past few years have become way more conscious about the ingredients in our food and more cognizant about what we allow in our bodies. As a result, products that are too high in calories, sodium, or contain high fructose corn syrup haven't done well in the court of public opinion. And let's be honest, the sorts of ultra-processed foods offered by these big companies are exactly what consumers seem to be gravitating away from. I mean, take the artificial food dyes as an example. In our episode on the subject, we talked about how big companies like Kellogg's and General Mills tried to remove artificial dyes from their food years ago, only to reverse course when fans weren't happy about it. Fast forward to today, and it feels like the opinions on artificial food dyes have completely turned, and they're almost universally on the way out here in the States. And I would like to think we had something to do with that, but therein lies the problem. These massive corporate blobs are just ill-equipped to handle how quick public sentiment can change on a dime. They operate on the speed of quarterly earnings reports, not TikTok trends. Therefore, theoretically, a smaller company, not weighed down by all the blobbiness, should be able to put out products that meet society's ever-changing tastes, literally. And do you know what else consumers really care about? Price. Yep, what discussion about big mega corporations and food would be complete without discussions of inflation? Woohoo! But in all seriousness, let's look again at a company like Kraft Heinz. Like many food brands, Kraft Heinz did moderately well during the pandemic as most of us stayed home, snacked, baked, fun COVID stuff. However, post-pandemic prices for Kraft Heinz products only continue to rise thanks to a mix of supply chain issues and, of course, corporate greed. I mean, a 14-ounce bottle of Heinz ketchup costs almost $3 today. Meanwhile, Walmart's Great Value brand is just under $1. And let me tell you, Heinz is not 3 times better tasting to justify that price. And frankly, the super large corporate blobs just haven't had much of an incentive to try and drive costs down. They raised prices and people still bought them. But now we have had enough. More budget-friendly consumers gravitated towards generic or store brand options. Meanwhile, customers with a little bit more money to spend decided to splurge on more premium brands with supposedly healthier, locally sourced ingredients. So let's take Kraft Heinz again as an example, specifically that slow-growth grocery business they're spinning off. Without the high-margin sauces and spreads flying off the shelf, the grocery side of the business will be forced to keep the cost of their wieners low in order to stay afloat. With all that being said, there's a lot of reasons to be cautiously optimistic about these big food breakups. And I did say cautiously optimistic, because even if everything goes exactly the way that Kraft Heinz hopes, with profits in both of their new companies soaring, that ironically may end up bringing everything back to square one. Just ask Kellogg's. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, back in 2023, Kellogg's went through a very similar corporate breakup that saw them split their snacks and cereal divisions in two. And you know what? It worked. Both companies ended up seeing improvements in their business. Almost too much improvement. Because in August of 2024, the snacks side of the business was bought for $35.9 billion by candy mega giant Mars. And just this past July, the cereal side was bought for $3.1 billion by Ferrero Rocher. So yeah, the corporate blob that was Kellogg's split in two, only to have each half get reabsorbed into another blob just a few years later. But you know what? Even if that doesn't end up happening to Kraft Heinz or Keurig Dr. Pepper or Pepsi if they go down the same route, the writing may already be on the wall. Big Food may have already lost the war to an enemy nobody saw coming. You see, when we think of these humongous multinational food and drink corporations, we tend to think they're unstoppable, that they're very much the apex predator. However, when the CEOs of Coke or Kraft Heinz or whoever lay their head on their pillows at the end of the day, there are companies far bigger than them that keep them up at night. And let's just say they offer customers a great value. That's right, we're talking about store brands. We already touched on this a little bit earlier, but cost has increasingly become a big factor for consumers when deciding which sort of drink and snacks they're gonna buy. So it should be no surprise that customers
Yeah, as what Santi mentioned, more and more individuals are more financially conscious, price conscious, cost conscious. We are more literate. We study more. We are more. Our brain can function better in comparison to our older generations, in which we recognize, hey, this is going to cost me more, this is going to cost me less. There's less of a brand loyalty and more towards the fact that I want to survive with enough money. So yeah.
Would rather buy the $1 great value ketchup from Walmart than pay triple the price for what is more or less the exact same product. And no matter what they do, even if splitting up their companies works perfectly and they're able to drive costs down for consumers, let's be honest, when it comes to cost, they're never gonna be able to compete with the likes of Walmart or even Costco's Kirkland brand. We think of Coke and Pepsi as these massive companies, and they are, but compared to Walmart and Costco, they're small potatoes. Forget all of Costco. If the Kirkland brand alone was spun off into its own company, it would bring in more annual revenue than Kraft Heinz or Coca-Cola. That's the sort of difference we're talking about here. And since Walmart and Costco make ungodly amounts of money every year, and because they own the stores, they can afford to always make sure their price is at bargain levels, even if it means cutting into profit or even taking a hit. Costco hot dog combo, anyone? And that is where big food is really in trouble. Because as the old adage goes, once you go generic, you don't go back to the name brand Eric, or however it goes. Once customers
You tried.
have jumped ship and realized that generics are worth it considering their price tag, no amount of corporate reshuffling or brand reinvestment is gonna bring them back. I guess it turns out the only way to beat the unstoppable multinational corporate blobs of the food industry were even bigger and blobbier, multinationalier corporate blobs. But hey, that's just a theory. A food theory. Buen provecho. And if you think that creator-made products also have a chance to dethrone corporate blobs, click the video on screen to find out why YouTuber products are seemingly always doomed to fail. And as always, I'll see you next week.
So thank you so much to the food theorists for this episode. I always like their videos to be educational and entertaining to watch. Edutainment. Thank you so much. But hey, that's just a theory. A food theory. Hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you in my next video. Thank you.